All right, well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and call to order the regular meeting, March 8th, for Placer County LAFCO. We'll go ahead and get started with a roll call and then the flag salute.
All right, Commissioner Alpine?
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson?
Here.
Commissioner Landon?
Here.
Commissioner Mendonça?
Here.
Commissioner Rohan?
Here.
Commissioner Stevens?
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Holmes?
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Carl? Alternate Commissioner Nisley?
Here.
Alternate Commissioner Starsky? And Chair Burris?
Here. All right, please join me in flag salute. All right, with that, we will go ahead and take a look at the approval of the agenda. I'm going to turn this over. Michelle, did you have any comments on the agenda before we approve the agenda order?
Yes, we have a slight change, and it's really more of an announcement from our council.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I wanted to update you on the current rule that has now taken effect with respect to remote appearances by members of legislative bodies. Of course, LAFCO is a legislative body, so it applies to your commissioners to the extent you're going to appear remotely. As most of you probably recall, pre-pandemic, you could not appear remotely at a meeting unless the address where you were at was published with the agenda, and you made the address you were at available to the public to come to and attend right next to you. And that was the rule with no exceptions pre-pandemic. When the pandemic hit and Governor Newsom issued the declaration of a state of emergency, that gave him the authority to adopt a number of executive orders, which he did, and a number of those related to that particular rule and your ability to appear remotely at public meetings. Last week, the governor rescinded the state of emergency, and along with that, many of his emergency orders, executive orders that is, went away as well. So now, and included within those were the special suspension of the rules regarding remote appearances by members of legislative bodies. However, in the meantime, the legislature had adopted an amendment to a statute that dealt with remote appearances. And so now with the revocation of the state of emergency, that statute is now what governs remote appearances. The rule for appearing remotely and having the address published on the agenda and making it available for members of the public to attend as well is still on the books, but now it's a general rule, meaning as a general rule it has exceptions. Previously there were no exceptions, as I said. So the exceptions are set forth in statute. And one of the requirements for those exceptions to apply is that the legislative body, and from here on out I'll just refer to LAFCO in particular, although it would apply to city councils and county boards of supervisors and boards of special districts as well, is that the meeting has to be made available to the public on a remote basis as well, where they can both visually observe the meeting as well as hear the meeting, of course, and where they can attend and participate, that is, make public comments virtually as well as in person. So as long as your commission is holding a meeting along those lines in conformance with those rules, then what I'm about to explain would apply. If for some reason the commission ever went back to in-person meetings only, then these exceptions wouldn't apply and you'd be back to the general rule as being the only rule. With respect to attendance by commissioners at a meeting, there are essentially three requirements that you have to satisfy in order to be able to do that. The first requirement is split into what I call option 1 and option 2. Option 1 says that as soon as possible you're to apprise the commission of your inability to participate in a meeting in person and state the quote-unquote good cause for your inability to attend. That you can also call this option 1 a good cause option. Under the good cause option, the commission doesn't have to approve that as a whole. It's just essentially self-executing. The commissioner says, I have good cause. You have to briefly describe what that good cause is. The description can be fewer than 20 words according to the statute, so it doesn't require a lengthy explanation. There is a cap on the number of times you can use the good cause option within a calendar year, and the cap is 2, twice. Option 2 is I would call it the emergency option. It says that, again, as soon as you're aware, as soon as possible, you notify the commission that you're unable to attend due to quote-unquote emergency circumstances. Under this statute, emergency doesn't refer just to a public emergency. It can refer to essentially a personal emergency. It can include a medical condition that suddenly makes you unable to attend in person, but which you're able to still participate remotely. It could be, weather conditions in this neck of the woods that prevent you from attending in person, but you can still attend remotely. What's different about option 2 or the emergency option from option 1 is that the option 2 requires the commission to approve the request. So if a commissioner seeks to participate remotely under the emergency option, after stating the good cause or the basis for the emergency, again, briefly, 20 words or less, generally, the commission would have to vote on that request and approve it. So under option 1, the good cause exception, there's no vote by the commission. Under option 2, the emergency option, there is a vote by the commission. With respect to describing the emergency circumstance, if, for instance, it is a medical situation, you don't have to disclose, of course, any personal medical information. You merely can state it's a medical situation. I'm unable to attend. There is no cap on the number of times you can use option 2, the emergency option. However, there is a total cap on the number of times you can use both options. And the cap is either 20% of the meetings in a calendar year, or where the legislative body meets 10 times or less, the cap is 2. So with LAFCOs, if you do the math, most LAFCOs in the state generally do not meet 15 times in a year. If you did, that might get you up to a cap of 3, applying the 20% standard. Usually you're meeting 10 times roughly in a year. So you would have the cap of 2 regardless of whether you use option 1 or option 2. Except in what I would think would be a very highly unusual circumstance where the commission were to meet more than 15 times or more in a calendar year. So that's the first requirement that the commissioner would have to satisfy, either option 1 or option 2. Then under both options, the commissioner needs to disclose whether there are any persons age 18 or older present with them where they are appearing remotely, and if there are, to identify the relationship of those persons to the commissioner. And then the final requirement is that the commissioner has to appear both visually and with sound. So if you're on Zoom, and I'll refer to the 2 commissioners on Zoom here in particular in a moment, you have to have your camera on, as well, of course, to have your audio on when you speak. So those are the new requirements that now apply if a commissioner wants to appear remotely at what the statute calls a teleconference meeting, which is what your commission is doing today. So that's the general outline. And I will move in a moment here to Commissioner Stevens and Commissioner Gustafson to walk them through that for purposes of this meeting. But before I do that, any commissioner have any questions?
Any questions? I feel like that was very thorough.
Okay. All right.
One question.
Well, the effective date of the statute was January 1 of this year. But now all the other executive orders are also taken away, so we're now under that statute. Okay.
Question, so if we change if one of us is going to appear remotely, does the posting that we've posted today satisfy the posting requirements?
It does, yes. With these option 1 and option 2, and you comply with those requirements, it relieves the legislative body of that general rule where you would have to publish the location where you are appearing remotely.
Okay.
Now you don't have to do that.
Great, thank you.
Okay. And with that, then, I will walk each of our commissioners through that for the record for today's meeting, because if these requirements are not complied with, then the commissioners cannot take any action on any item on the agenda. So first, I'll start with Commissioner Stevens. Do you wish to use the good cause exception today?
Option 1, yes, I would.
Can you briefly state what the good cause is, sir?
Well, there was a blizzard here this morning, and I didn't think I could make it over the summit to the meeting. I was planning to attend, but the blizzard changed my mind.
All right, thank you. And are any persons age 18 and older present with you right now?
Well, not in the same room. My wife, who is older than 18, is in the building.
Thank you, and I think for future reference, we can limit it to the room. The idea being, is there anybody whispering in your ear, so to speak, while you're, or potentially, not actually, but potentially whispering in your ear?
No.
All right, thank you. So that will satisfy Commissioner Stevens, and he's now able to participate in any action your commission takes. Now, turning to you, Commissioner Gustafson, would you like to use the good cause option?
Yes, option 1. I had a pre-scheduled trip that predated the changes in all of these rules and regulations.
All right, thank you. And is there anyone age 18 or older present with you in the room now?
No.
All right, thank you. And that satisfies the requirements for Commissioner Gustafson. Thank you, Chair.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. With that, I think we can accept a motion to approve the agenda order.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Alpine,
Yes.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Yes.
Commissioner Landon,
Yes.
Commissioner Mendonça,
Yes.
Commissioner Rohan,
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens,
Yes.
and Chair Burris.
Yes. All right, we'll go ahead and move to public comment. This is the section of the agenda for items that are not on the agenda today. I will just remind everybody that we do have speaker cards, so if you don't mind, we would appreciate you filling one out. It makes the clerk's life much easier, helps keep me organized. It's not a requirement, but we do appreciate you working with us on that. So if anyone would like to make a public comment at this time on an item not on today's agenda, please feel free to come forward.
I guess I need to fill out my card first?
You can do it after.
Oh, good. Mike Arbedian, or Placer County Tomorrow, and Pacific to American Divide, and for Lincoln, for, let's see, what is the name of that group? It's, well, I'll get to it. Anyway, I'm not talking about Lincoln, I'm just talking to you generally here. I have a handout for everybody. I think there's enough to go around. Who do I give this to?
How about our clerk?
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, as I mentioned, at one of the communities here, the municipal bonding situation is deteriorating pretty rapidly, and Placer County's been making very heavy use of it. For instance, one of the major projects has $500 million in CMFA bonding. But first I'm going to read the early part of the LAFCO law, the Knox-Nisbet law, practically the first sentence when it talks about the legislative declarations. The legislature finds and declares that it's the policy of the state to encourage orderly growth and development which are essential to the social, fiscal, economic well-being of the state. The legislature recognizes that the logical formation and determination of local agency boundaries is an important factor in promoting orderly development. What's the word? Financing that development with sometimes competing, or balancing that development with sometimes competing state interests, or and so forth. promoting orderly development. I said, okay, discouraging urban sprawl, preserving open space, prime agriculture, and extending.
The LAFCO feed just shut to mute.
Anyway, extending government services. So that's how I just wanted to begin my talk here today, and I'll probably insert that in the record for the two major items also that are before you, and I'll fill this out.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public comment on items not on today's agenda? All right, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment, and we will move to the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda are routine in nature and will be moved on in one blanket motion. Anybody can pull an item from consent. Would anybody like to pull any items from consent today? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. Second. All right, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Alpine,
Yes.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Yes.
Commissioner Landon,
Yes.
Commissioner Mendonça,
Yes.
Commissioner Rohan,
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens,
Yes?
and Chair Burris.
Yes. All right. Perfect. With that, we'll go ahead and move. Oh. Are we okay? Yeah. Okay. With that, we'll move to our first public hearing, item A. This is the LAFCO Project 2021-03 Final Focused Municipal Service Review Study for the City of Lincoln.
Thank you, Chair Burrows. Hello, Commissioners. Just a very brief update before I bring up Swale Consultant Group. The draft study, you may recall, was received by the Commission on December 14th, and the Commission opened a 30-day public comment. And we did receive several comments, which are noted in the comment log, which our consultant will go over. I just want to reiterate that since the public comment close, we've continued to receive public comments, and in fact, even today, until the chair closes the public comment, you may continue to do so. I believe it was in one of our previous meetings, the chair announced that any comments that we received, that the commission receives after January 13th would be included as an exhibit. So you'll see those comments in the final MSR, which will be posted online once the commission approves it, whether it's today or at a future date. So with that, I'm just going to bring up Kateri to talk about the changes in the final study. There were just basically three major changes. What used to be Chapter 10 is now split up between Chapter 10 and 11. The Village 5 and portions of Village 7 is in Chapter 10, while the Sud B NAQ annexation proposal is in Chapter 11, and then, of course, the comment log. With that, I'll turn it over to Kateri.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Commissioners. Let's see.
Oh, Jeremy, do you mind changing the slide? He'll change it. Okay. Okay. Do you want to start?
I'll just start without slides. That's okay. Hi, my name is Kateri Harrison with Swell Consulting, and of course, we're discussing the final municipal service review for the City of Lincoln today. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. You may recall that the original municipal service review for the City of Lincoln was approved by LAFCO in 2010, and our consulting firm was tasked with updating that document. There was a draft municipal service review that was presented to this commission on December 14th, and public comment was open for 30 days. We received, I believe it was 9 public comments, and then plus 2 more today. But I wanted to thank each of the people who provided public comments. We carefully read over each letter that we received. We took a look at how we could modify the municipal service review to address each comment. Where warranted, we did make changes to the municipal service review. As Michelle said, the big changes to the document is the old Chapter 10 was split up to give each proposed annexation proposal their own chapter. So Chapter 10 focuses on Village 5 and that portion of Village 7. And Chapter 11 focuses on Sud B, NEQ. The other changes that we made were we added Chapter 12, which has the comments and the response to comments. Those are presented in table format. Most of the comments that we received, now we have our slideshow. Hopefully people on Zoom can see the slideshow also. So let me just backtrack a little bit. This slide shows the 2010 MSR and then the new MSR. This slide shows a list of all the comments that we received. So 9 comments, which we carefully reviewed, and remarkably, each commenter offered very helpful comments. So that was nice. And this histogram shows the number of comments per chapter. So most of the comments were addressed to Chapter 10, which that in the draft, that was the combined annexation chapter. So that was where most of the concern was regarding, was the proposed annexations. The executive summary, Chapter 1, also received several comments, and I think that was because that was a concise summary of the whole document, so that's probably what most people read. This talks about the major changes. So we already talked about splitting Chapter 10 up and Chapter 12. We updated information on the drinking water treatment plant as advised by Placer County Water Agency. We updated information on the wastewater treatment plant and their capacity to accommodate development in the sphere of influence based on a letter from Travis Williams, the city engineer, and that letter is in the appendix to the municipal service review. We also added Appendix J, which is a copy of the development agreements for each of the annexations, because sometimes those are hard to find. So we wanted it to make it a little bit more available to the public. The City of Lincoln did kindly provide a lot of new information since December 14th. So with that new information and with all the public comments that we received, the municipal service review that we're presenting to you today is an information-rich document. It does meet the requirements of the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act, and we support the executive officer's recommendation for approval of the municipal service review. So thank you for your time. I'll be in the audience if there are any questions. And also just wanted to say thanks to my colleagues at a couple different firms helping with this project. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, so we'll turn it back to Michelle here.
Yes, so I'll just give Jeremy a second because my next slides are really just conditions of approval.
Okay.
I will say that I've been made aware that in Placer LAFCO, this is not normal to have conditions of approvals on municipal service reviews. But in other LAFCOs, it is. Because sometimes you don't know what you don't know in the beginning of a process. And so sometimes these studies can lead to other studies. And so the commission will sometimes, stop the study if there's not a sense of urgency, right? It's not an emergency situation. And other times when there are pending proposals, we'll say, okay, we saw something here, but we don't want to slow down the process, and so they'll add a condition of approval for additional studies. So yes, it might be a little bit strange for this LAFCO, but my experience with other LAFCOs is that this happens. So the first condition of approval for the municipal service review that staff is recommending is for the city to conduct a long-range fire department master plan. And that's similar to what the commission approved for the South Placer Fire Protection District in our last meeting. So really it has two components, which is a standard of cover study, which is recommended by the consultant. But there's also a community risk assessment. And as we talked about with South Placer, it takes a look at where the growth is, right? And so the risk that's associated with that growth. And so that's why I'm recommending that we add that component as well. I am recommending that the city conduct that study and then provide the commission with progress reports starting in 6 months. It does take a while to conduct that study. With the South Placer, the reason why we're able to conduct that sooner rather than later is because we already have other studies for that district underway. So that's the first condition. And then once the city has a final study, then I'll bring it back to your commission for your review. Condition number 2 is that the city will continue working with your staff on completing the Village 5, Village 7 proposal. You may have noticed that there were several recommendations from the consultant. And as I noted in my staff report, to me, with all of the recommendations, it really speaks to the fact that the application remains incomplete. And a lot of the information that the consultant needs, LAFCO will need in the plan for providing services that's required under statute. So my recommendation is to have the city basically complete that plan for providing services as required comprehensively, right? So that's the second condition. The third condition is that before we conduct a municipal service review for the city of Lincoln again, that we really need to sit down with their staff and take a look at what a complete scope of services should be for the city of Lincoln, because there were a number of recommendations in the municipal service review that talks about for the next MSR, we should look at X, Y, and Z. And so I think if your staff and city staff work closer together to develop a scope, similar to what we did for with the fire districts, then I think we'll have a richer MSR next time. So with that, my recommendation is to adopt the final MSR. The resolution that's included in your packet includes the terms and conditions that I've outlined, as well as the findings and determinations. If you have any questions, I'm happy to.
Yes, I do have a question right off the bat. So with us adopting this MSR today with conditions, my understanding is that we would come back to the MSR study and essentially amend it once those other studies are complete in order to include them as appendices to this study. Is that correct?
Yes, you can certainly provide direction to staff to include them. That's also normal. I've seen that from other LAFCOs, and we can do that then. It's not that you're, changing the MSR, you're
Right.
just adding additional information.
I think it would be cleaner if we kind of plan to go that direction if we do this, just for the sake of having one document that's easy to find and accessible next time we come around, because I know that that's been a struggle. And at that time, if we were to make that amendment, would we be opening up for public comment again?
That's a legal question.
Yes, you would be.
Okay.
So, as indicated, the commission wouldn't be required to add that to the MSR, but if your commission were considering doing that, then it would be subject to public comment.
I'd like to look at it. That's how I'd like to handle it. Now, does the board have any other questions, comments, concern before I open it up to public comment? No?
Trinity?
Yes.
Sorry. I wanted to confirm then on all 3 conditions, we would amend the MSR to, if the commission so chose, to accept the information and Lincoln's plans for those.
That would be the direction I'd like to take.
So I think the only additional study for this MSR would be the fire, because
Right.
that's a citywide, whereas the other 2 conditions, it's one's for the future, and then the other
Right.
one is just for Village 5, 7B.
basically what I'm hoping to see is anything that would have provided substantive context to this MSR had it been available today, like on our desk, and it would have potentially been included in the report. I want to make sure that when we look at this study in the future, we're able to see all of this context and content included in that study if we wanted to look at one source for the information. So that would be my desire, would be to see all of these captured as appendices once they're complete.
Okay.
And then if I could follow up, so I'm more familiar with conditions of approval, the county issues, but in a LAFCO situation, if for some reason they failed to provide the long-range fire department master plan in a timely manner, what are the steps we can take at that point?
So the commission has the authority, even today, to conduct the study ourselves, like we're
Okay.
doing for South Placer Fire Protection District. Here, I just recommended the city of Lincoln. They have a much larger bandwidth and staff and can undertake that study.
And it would
Okay.
probably avoid a lot of the issues with the back and forth, and I think
Right.
that's a good idea.
Well, the only concern I have with that is your second and third condition are not really anything that's directly implemented into the MSR. It's just, it can be brought in the annexation application. The other information you're requesting in condition 2 can be brought in their annexation application for 5 and 7, not necessarily affecting this MSR. And then the final condition is just a agreement to work together on a.
Right, and that's because, as I mentioned, I got to the 8th or 9th page of all of the recommendations. And in my mind, from the consultant, and in my mind, it really boiled down to these 3 issues. Emergency services, the scope that maybe that we had looked at in the very beginning wasn't sufficient for a full MSR for the city. And there was information that we could have requested. And then finally, Village 5 and 7 is just an incomplete application. So that, to me, is why it was, as opposed to having, I think, as I mentioned, I was on page 8 or 9.
I think it's appropriate, given it ties up closes the loop on the fact that we have a specific chapter in the MSR dedicated to that. So because we have that specific chapter, I think it would be clean to add the condition and then add the result of that condition back to as an amendment once the MSR.
I think it's an issue of impracticality. Because what you're asking for are things that are unrelated necessarily to the MSR. Like number 3 could be accomplished in a memo of understanding between the city and this agency as to cooperation and working.
Right, it's just, you're right. I mean, I could very well send a letter, but then this makes it part of the record, so if your current staff is no longer here, they can look at the last MSR without having to find a letter, and it's right up front.
Yep, okay.
Okay.
If you think it's practical, then.
I would
Susan, go
like to delve a little deeper into Cindy's question as it relates to the second item in the resolution regarding the date. No, maybe that's the first item.
First item has the deadline.
It is, first item. If October 11th passes and our LAFCO doesn't take any action, what is the net effect of this, on this resolution?
Nothing, it's really, I will report to your commission. I contacted the city, asked for an update, did not provide an update. And then at that point, you can decide, like I said, this is well within your power, within your authority to conduct fire studies. We have one for the Western Fire Study already. So, and we have a very similar study that will begin, I believe, next week for South Placer Fire District. So,
But the integrity of the MSR is,
oh, right, it doesn't null and void the municipal service review. None of these conditions do.
Okay, excellent. Okay, well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up public comment on this item. Again, I'm going to remind everybody about the speaker cards. If anybody would like to speak on this item, I would ask that you provide a speaker card, but you're not required to, so feel free to come up. Come on. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Albert Schreiber. I'll get you a card when I'm done. So I've stood at this podium the last two LAFCO meetings and asked you to, as soon as you could, approve the SUD-B NEQ project and separate out the Village 7 remainder from the Village 5 project and move it forward, move the Village 7 portion forward. As I've said, I believe the Village 5 project is a train wreck. And I had three conditions when I was up here on the Village 7 portion. I'd like to make sure those are applied if this so moves forward in that direction. With that said, full disclosure, I did not read the 745 pages of the MSR. So I apologize ahead of time if I missed something. But when it's talking about the money and funding and full build out, what I didn't see in there was anything regarding the ag overlay. If you're not familiar with the ag overlay, it's also was passed along with Village 5 that if you're in ag, you can continue to do ag forever. If you've never done ag, you can do ag if you want. You can sell it to somebody and they can do ag forever. So under those conditions, I'm not sure how you can get to full build out. Because it's quite possible that Village 5 could turn out looking like Loomis or Fair Oaks or one of those that has a lot of little ranchettes all over the place, which is not going to produce the income that that this MSR needs to fund everything. So if I missed that, I'd like to be corrected, but it's funny that it never comes up in any of the documents. As far as the MSR and the water responses our attorney sent, I was a little disappointed in the response, and specifically to the groundwater. The response was that you're gonna have the city get a letter from Sigma and a hydrologist saying everything's good. It's kind of like having the fox watch a hen house because they're all in the same pool together. But more importantly, the question was very specific about water rights that the city has or doesn't have, and neither Sigma nor hydrologists can determine water rights. So the answer in the MSR was a little underwhelming. I would love to talk all afternoon, but my clock's not ticking, so I don't want to run over time. So where am I? About 30 seconds. Okay, thank you very much. The other thing is, if you got my letter from my attorneys and you had time to read it, that's great. If not, it basically spells out that, you know, unfortunately, the city attorney in the responses to the draft MSR just flat out lied, and that's shameful. And you know, if the city attorney is going to lie about stuff in a public document about what the court said or not said or doing or not doing, then what other information in this document that you've gotten from the city is accurate? That's the question I pose. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Additional public comment on this item? Okay, come on up. And then do we have a handheld speaker?
Oh, yes.
Good afternoon. The chair as well as the rest of the board and those here as well. I'm a resident of Lincoln, and therefore I pay the taxes. It's a wonderful town. Going through the draft of December the 27th, 22, my first question is that the most recent information that has been received from the city of Lincoln? And more importantly, or specifically, when it deals with what we've talked about in the way of safety personnel, police department, fire department, that sort of thing, as well as the wastewater treatment plant. Fortunately, the city of Lincoln has put on more firefighters as well as more police officers. However, looking at the number of that versus what should be required at the level of staffing for the city, they still do not meet that requirement. The reason I bring that up, and I'm not saying, maybe it's just the conditions of where we are, but essentially what has happened in order for the city of Lincoln to add more people to that particular body is there were ways from the COVID funds that allowed the city to utilize those legally in order to add those. However, the projection at that time, the amount of money that was placed on that would eventually, if the city needs to figure out what to do with that by the end of 3 years from the time they implemented that. So the money will cover them with the people and personnel that they put in place for the next 3 years. Looking through the draft, literally through pages 203 up to 220, basically what I had continually was reading was, unfortunately, the city of Lincoln did not meet and give LAFCO information needed about their expenses, operating expenses, what they have in the way of income coming in. I would like to find out if the city indeed is up to that. And my concern is, looking through the document, it's like it's been a constant trudge up a hill trying to get those documents. And my biggest concern is if you're having problems meeting and getting that information now, is that information, if it's readily achievable at this point in time, I certainly didn't see it in any of the draft. So my concern is, as a citizen for the city of Lincoln, we already are in a process because the wastewater treatment plant is now having to be reworked in order, based on the city, we are at the point where we're reaching maximum capacity. And so there's millions of dollars that are involved for a lot of us in Lincoln to pay. So I'm concerned about the expenses and what's taking place with that.
Thank you. All right, do we have any additional public comment on this item?
Thank you. Mike Garabedian, Placer County Tomorrow. Heal Lincoln, something that came from a talk in the park when someone said, houses enough already in Lincoln? Heal Lincoln. And Pacific to American Divide. So I'm opposed to adopting the MSR at this time. Make a couple of points. The letter in there from the Department of Conservation about agricultural land is very confusing. It seems to say because there isn't water now, it's not statewide importance, but if you get it, maybe it will be, and so forth. That letter is not a competent letter dealing with the question of agricultural land in that particular aspect of it. And let's talk a little bit about what it means to not meet fire services and have adequate services. I was a volunteer fireman for about 5 years in a rural fire department, volunteer fire department. So the last time I asked at a Lincoln City Council meeting, they said apparently there are about 2 firefighters per, I don't know if this is still the case, per vehicle, per engine. And so let's show up at 2. Well, you need somebody to run the engineer, to run the equipment and get it going. You may need somebody to connect to the hydrant or whatever. You don't want one person going into the building on the hose. You need 2. And you need somebody to do search and rescue, which is a difficult and critical process. I mean, many people are killed by smoke before there's even fire out. So those things have to be done very carefully and meticulously. So it's not clear how many people they have now. And of course, at the time I asked that question, I think the police chief was also the fire chief. And I think Auburn did the right thing when it went to have it. It also at that one point had that. But you need to have a fire chief because there are different cultures there, as capable and as much experience as there may be. So My view, actually, this is what's going on here in Placer County with all the different annexations is a very good record for a recommendation. I feel that the LAFCOs should actually be abolished. They are not doing the job of stopping sprawl and protecting agriculture, and I think it's time to reconsider that. As I think I mentioned here before, it was adopted in 1964 under Pat Brown as governor. The LAFCOs were set up and they were been modified since then, and it's really not doing the job. If you look at states that don't have that, where legislators are making up their mind, like New York, where I worked, and I think I mentioned that too, I think it's a more fair situation. The elections here you have, where in the districts maybe there's only one landowner gets to vote yes or no. This seems to be a problem going back to the founding of our country. Where you're people making decisions for future decisions, who's going to live there, or the annexation is defined so that it's going to pass for sure. It's going to pass for sure. There are all kinds of problems with the LAFCOs. I really think it's time to reconsider that, and I just think what's going on here in Placer County is proof for the need for that. Thank you, though, for this opportunity.
Thank you. Any more public comment? All right, seeing none, I'm closing public comment on this item, and we will move back to the board for action. Do we have any further discussion from the board on this item?
I would like to ask the commission if they would consider some small modification to provision C in the resolution. It currently reads, "The city and LAFCO staff shall work closely to develop a scope of services before issuing a request for proposal for the city's subsequent MSR study in approximately 5 years." I was wondering if the commission would be willing to entertain a small amendment to that to say something to the effect, "The city and the LAFCO staff shall work closely to develop a scope of services before issuing a request for proposal for the city's subsequent MSR study." Either maybe just put a period there, or prior to the next Lincoln MSR update.
Okay.
I don't think it substantially changes things and provides a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah.
Can I ask before we do that a follow-up question for what?
Yeah.
Susan, was there a reason that we picked 5 years?
They're usually, MSRs are typically done every 5 years.
Okay.
Susan, I'm supportive of that. I think that it might be nice to make it clear that we're going to make that scope happen before the request for proposal officially. Yeah, I'd be supportive of that. Do you have specific language you want to amend it to, though, to make it clean? Or maybe if our attorney could.
Do you have a suggestion?
Well, I think either the two options you provided would be clear enough, either a period.
I think a period after study
Right.
Yeah,
would do it.
perfect.
And so,
I'm supportive
if
of
there
that
isn't any
change.
other discussion, I would make a motion to approve the project, or the MSR, as staff has recommended with that minor revision to provision C.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, can I get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Alpine?
Yes.
Commissioner Gustafson?
Yes.
Commissioner Alpine?
Yes, I said yes.
I'm sorry.
It's coming back.
Commissioner Landon?
Yes.
Commissioner Mendonça?
Yes.
Commissioner Rohan?
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens?
Yes.
Chair Burris?
Yes. All right, with that, we will move to public hearing, item B. And just to be clear, I did close the comment on item A, so the public hearing has ended the comment period for item A. On item B, we are moving to the LAFCO Project 2020-03 Special Use District B Northeast Quadrant Specific Plan Project. This is the annexation to the city of Lincoln. And we'll start with staff presentation.
I'll just quickly summarize the highlights of the staff report. The city has submitted an application for the annexation of the SUD B NAQ to the city of Lincoln. It's approximately 200 acres, and the purpose is to develop 429 residential units, 65 acres of commercial, and 27 acres of parks and open space. This is the location of the proposal area. I want to point out Highway 65 because that's important, which is south of the annexation boundary, which is a dark outline of the proposal area there that you see. And I'll tell you why Highway 65 is important, but I just want to point it out for now. Oh, sorry, let me just back up. It's located south of Nicholas Road and north of Highway 65 to give everyone a little bit of context. So there's several factors that the commission must consider, and all of the factors are outlined in your staff report. I just want to point out a few of the factors and some of the suggestions and conditions that that staff pulled from the factors and included in the report and or the resolution. This is one suggestion for the timely availability of water supply. The MSR does confirm that there's available water supply or adequate water supply for the said BNAQ, but there are some concerns about the city's reliance on groundwater for future projects, and so that should be addressed in future annexation projects that will rely on groundwater, whether it's the main source or a backup situation. K talks about the sufficiency of revenues. The consultant, again, expressed some concerns for police services and that the city may not be collecting sufficient revenues. So I'm just suggesting that the city take a look at that fee, and if they need to increase or if everything is great, then to let the proponents know. Back to Highway 65. One of the items or one of the factors that we look at is the creation of unincorporated islands, illogical boundaries, things of that nature. And when you look at the SUD BNAQ and abut it next to a past annexation that was done a few years ago, it creates this island, this lot 91 that you see, the small triangle. And it also, it has about 200 feet of Highway 65 that's not included in this proposal, but also not included in another proposal for the city of Lincoln. And since the city will have to pre-zone and request annexation for lot 91, they should do that for the Caltrans as well to request annexation. It is absolutely within the commission's authority and power to amend the boundary, but when you do that, it does add time to the processing, and with LAFCO having the adopted tax transfer agreement between the city and the county since May of 2022, and we've just been waiting on the MSR, my recommendation is to have the city submit an application to LAFCO. Now, in the meantime, they will be required to provide services to these two areas, so that's police and fire most notably. I highly doubt they're doing road improvements at this time, but they'll have to provide those emergency services to that area. At the same time, they're providing it to the SUD BNAQ. So that the two conditions that I just mentioned is that the city will pre-zone lot 91 consistent with their general plan and to initiate the annexation, and then they must submit it within 90 days, which comes to June 7, 2023. That doesn't mean that it has to be complete, simply that we've received an application, because as I mentioned, in the meantime, once the executive officer signs the certificate of completion and records it, the SUD BNAQ annexation is final, and that means they have to now start providing services to SUD BNAQ and that little island. Just a very brief mention of CEQA. We are the responsible agency. So you have the agency, the lead agencies, which is in this case the city. You have the statement of overriding considerations, which is in your packet, the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, which is also in your packet, and you're required to adopt these two documents. And then the full CEQA document is on the city's website, and that was provided to your commission as well as the public. The other item, because this annexation includes portions of private properties that's not within those three substantial parcels, we do not have 100% consent, but those individuals, the residents, the registered voters, the landowners, they were notified. And so we have not received a written protest or any verbal protest, but and so if that continues at the conclusion of the public comment period here today, I recommend that your commission waive the conducting authority proceedings, most commonly known as a protest hearing.
Okay.
The other condition is just really additional fees for the State Board of Equalization. Not additional, we haven't received fees for the State Board, and it's $2,000, which we will submit once we have the certificate of completion recorded in about 30 days, if your commission adopts approval. So the staff recommendation is to conditionally approve the change of organization via the adoption of the resolution that's within your packet. There are terms and conditions, and the commission is, I guess, I'm requesting that you waive the conducting authority proceedings.
Okay.
And if you have any questions,
Do we have any questions, concerns, comments from the board before I open up public comment? All right. Public comment is now open. Same procedures apply. Would anybody like to make a public comment on this item? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to bring it. Okay, here we go.
Mike Garabedian, Placer County tomorrow, Pacific to American Divide. So I'm wondering what the rush is, if there is a rush on these, how many annexations are already being approved. It would be good to understand what is going on in terms of responsible growth of the city. What are next on the horizon? My first exposure to this was at the Municipal Advisory Committee, the Rural MAC. And at that time, Lincoln had a development coordinator. And he would go to these meetings and do a slideshow of all the pending subdivisions, and that's all. He would talk about the different stages and where they were at. I never sensed any sense of planning or direction or rationality. Just grow, 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 grow. And on this project, I'm curious to know what is the rush. Now, at the last meeting, I think Supervisor Wygant pointed out that the financial arrangements have been made between the city and the county. And the only one I was familiar with in detail, because I lived in Citrus Heights for a while, and I was there when it became a city, though not long before that, was one where the Sacramento County there's hardly any decent word to say how badly they how bad a deal the city got, forcing them into a position where they were trying to develop every vacant lot and trying to develop where they didn't have adequate street services and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering how rational this process is, what the rush is. Obviously, the people want to get, I mean, it looks to me like very much the developers just want to get their vested rights, get a shovel in the ground. There's not much house sales going on. Well, they get that shovel in the ground, they get their vested rights, and then maybe 10 or 20 years they'll do something. I don't know. But I just think it needs some sense of what's going on and why this one and why not others. Why is this one important and so forth? It'd be good to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? All right, seeing none, public comment is now closed. We're back to the board for decision making. Any discussion, comments? All right, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move approval.
And I'll second.
Could I get a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Alpine,
Yes.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Yes.
Commissioner Landon,
Yes.
Commissioner Mendonça,
Yes.
Commissioner Rohan,
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens,
Yes.
and Chair Burris.
Yes. All right, with that, public hearings are now closed, public comments closed. We're moving to our executive officer's report.
Thank you. Well, I'll keep it brief. I have nothing to report, but if you have any questions on any of our projects, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any commissioner comments, closing thoughts? No. Go ahead. Oh, are you sure? All right.
Oh, did you? Well, Commissioner Nicely and I attended a class. Is that what? Oh, okay. I thought you wanted to talk about that. I thought it was well done.
Well, with that, it looks like the room decided for us. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.